For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known silence where humanity once stood. The records, what little survived, spoke of war, fire, and defiance. Of a species so violent, so unyielding, that the united forces of the galaxy had to purge them to protect civilization. The Xanthar Dominion, now the most dominant power across the Milky Way, considered the tale of humanity just that, a cautionary myth. Children were taught about the savages who burned too brightly and died by their own flame. But history, as it often does, only captured a fraction of the truth. That truth began to awaken in a remote and forbidden region known as the Dead Zone. The galaxy had long abandoned it after the so-called Purge, leaving it untouched and quarantined. Nothing lived there, nothing grew. For millennia, the area was a dark scar in the spiral arms of the Milky Way, a place of silence and radiation where no signals dared echo. But then, inexplicably, a signal emerged. It began as a faint anomaly, energy readings inconsistent with anything in the known archives. The science vessel Empirical Truth was the first to detect it, dispatched by the Xanthar Dominion to investigate. Its transmission showed a structure massive and ancient beginning to stir, lights flickering on after eons of dormancy. Then, without warning, the Empirical Truth went dark. No signals, no distress beacon, just silence again. When word reached the Dominion's capital, First Speaker Felzarich was disturbed. He was no fool. For all their power, the Xanthar were meticulous about maintaining control. The loss of a ship, especially one of the Dominion's top-tier scientific vessels, warranted serious attention. More so when the anomaly was traced back to energy patterns long since erased from known galactic databases. Yet, within the ancient ancestral archives, beneath layers of dust and disuse, an old historian brought forth something terrifying, a data crystal holding footage from a war 10 millennia old. The images were crude, corrupted with age, but what they showed froze Felzarich's blood. Ships, human ships, huge, angular and bristling with weaponry, unleashing devastation upon Xanthar fleets. And the energy signature matched perfectly with the disturbance in the Dead Zone. The implication was unthinkable. Humans, the elder archivist whispered. They're not extinct. The record stated otherwise. According to history, the final offensive against Earth had been conclusive. The planet had been bombarded until it became a husk. Humanity's last stand had ended with a massive energy detonation that destroyed much of the Xanthar fleet. Most had assumed it was a suicide weapon, a last act of rebellion. But what if it had been something else? What if it was a cover? What if humanity hadn't died at all? Across the galaxy, in the exact heart of the anomaly, a dormant station began to wake, hidden beneath layers of stellar dust, protected by cloaking fields and hardened against time. Unf Bastion Alpha stirred to life. Automated systems, buried deep within its hull, started cascading sequences of reactivation. Power conduits surged with long-dormant energy. Internal AI protocols scanned the galaxy, ran diagnostics, and confirmed. The parameters for Operation Exodus had been fulfilled. It was time. Cryogenic pods hissed open. Air recycled through atmospheric processors. One by one, the last generation of Earth's defenders awakened from their timeless sleep. Admiral Helena Vasquez opened her eyes, her vision blurry from the long stasis. Her body ached, muscles sluggish from disuse. But her mind sharpened quickly. She'd been trained for this, prepared for this moment. Even if no one had expected it would actually come. The voice of the Bastion's AI broke the silence. "Good morning, Admiral." Phase 1 activation complete. Fleet status, 98% operational. Bastion Alpha is online and awaiting your command. Helena coughed, forcing air back into her lungs. Status report, she croaked. The Nexus beacon has been detected, the AI responded. The criteria have been met. It is time for the return. For a long moment, Helena simply sat in silence. 10,000 years. 10,000 years had passed while they slept, while the galaxy forgot them. Her lips curled into a thin, grim smile. Then let's wake the others, she said. The long night is over. The scale of the operation was staggering. Beneath the hull of Bastion Alpha rested thousands of cryopods, each housing a soldier, scientist, or engineer, each one selected during the final days of Earth for their skill, intelligence, and loyalty. Operation Exodus had been the most ambitious plan in human history, developed in the darkest hours when defeat was all but certain. The plan wasn't to win. It wasn't even to survive on Earth. It was to vanish. To retreat from a galaxy hell-bent on their destruction, and in the void, prepare. They would sleep, evolve, and wait. Wait until the galaxy no longer remembered the sound of their name. And then, when the time was right, they would return. And now, they had. Within hours of the full station coming online, the old Earth fleet rebuilt and rearmed began to emerge. Hundreds of ships, once mothballed or hidden, powered up, their weapon systems recalibrating, their engines priming for deployment. Many had been cloaked in hidden recesses of space, integrated into the Bastion's shell, invisible to even the most advanced galactic scans. They came alive like phantoms, ancient beasts stirring beneath the surface of forgotten myths. Meanwhile, the Xanther Dominion, sensing something far beyond their comprehension, sent a fleet to investigate. 20 ships, each among the most powerful in their armada, led by the flagship Inevitable Dominance, arrived at the last known coordinates of the empirical truth. What they found was wreckage and a station that should not exist. By the first egg, one officer whispered, staring at the enormous construct floating in the void, its surface humming with energy and design elements unlike anything in known space. Before they could even process what they were seeing, dozens, then hundreds of ships decloaked around the station. Their configurations were unfamiliar, but somehow primal, dangerous, familiar, like a nightmare remembered. Scan those vessels, Fleet Commander Vextoral ordered. The results were immediate. Energy signatures matched those from the historical records, an officer responded. Sir, these are human vessels. Before Toral could react, a transmission cut across their communication channels. A woman appeared on their main screen, calm, composed, and unmistakably human. This is Admiral Helena Vasquez of the United Nations Defense Force, she stated firmly. Your vessel has entered restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Toral bristled. You are trespassing in Dominion territory, he growled. This space has been under our control for thousands of years. The human's face remained impassive. This station and the surrounding space have been under human control for far longer, Commander. Your presence here is a violation of boundaries established before your civilization even achieved spaceflight. The standoff was brief. When the Xanther refused to back down, Vasquez authorized a demonstration not of destruction, but of restraint. A single surgical strike disabled the engines of Inevitable Dominance, leaving it powerless but intact. It was a message not written in blood, but in precision. Helena opened another channel. That was a warning, Commander. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend what is ours. You have 1 standard hour to leave this sector. As the feed cut, Vex Toral stared at a blank screen, the red lights of emergency systems blinking around him. His thoughts churned. The humans weren't extinct. They weren't diminished. They were something new, something more. And they were back. Fleet Commander Vex Toral had faced many threats throughout his decades of service. Pirates, border skirmishes, rebellious vassals, even rogue AI infestations in the distant fringe sectors. But never in his most distant nightmare did he imagine staring down ships older than his civilization, floating silently in the void like specters returned from the grave. And yet, here they were, human vessels, hundreds of them, massive, precise, and unmistakably alive with ancient energy. He stood tall on the command deck of the inevitable Dominance, the pride of the Xanthar Dominion's fleet. Its crystalline hull shimmered under the glow of sensor lights, and its reactors pulsed with raw, almost arrogant confidence. But now, confidence had been replaced by disbelief. Before him, the screen showed the wreckage of the science vessel Empirical Truth, its crystalline frame torn apart with surgical precision. There was no sign of resistance, no indication of a firefight. Just obliteration, clean, decisive, and terrifyingly efficient. And behind that wreckage hung on the Bastion Alpha, a relic that was anything but relic. The structure was enormous, dwarfing even his flagship. Hummed with power, its surfaces aglow with activity. It was ancient in design, but in its core pulsed technology, the Dominion had no words for. "Sir." His tactical officer's voice broke the silence. "Multiple energy readings from the human fleet. They're powering up weapon systems." Vex Toral turned, his inner eyelids flickering. His pulse surged, but he kept his voice even. "How many vessels are confirmed?" The officer hesitated. "At least 300. Possibly more. Some were cloaked before they just appeared." 300. His mind reeled. 20 ships. That was all he had. 20 vessels, hand-picked and battle-tested. The strongest fleet unit the Xanthar Dominion had deployed in years. And yet, they were outnumbered more than 10 to 1 and outclassed by what he now understood to be ancient giants reborn. "Sir." Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel. Vex steeled himself. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and once more the same human woman appeared. Her presence was commanding, her voice even, almost diplomatic. "This is Admiral Helena Vasquez of the United Nations Defense Force. You are trespassing in restricted space. Identify yourselves." Toral stepped forward, pride flaring in spite of the circumstances. "I am Fleet Commander Vex Toral of the Xanthar Dominion. These sectors have been under our control for thousands of years. You are the trespassers." The woman didn't even blink. "This station and the surrounding region have been under human control for far longer, Commander. Your claims are irrelevant. You were destroyed." Toral snapped, his mandibles twitching. "Erased in the Great Purge." The Admiral's expression shifted, her lips curling into a faint, joyless smile. "Reports of our extinction were greatly exaggerated. We stepped away. We watched. We waited. And now we've returned." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a silence more deafening than any explosion. Aboard the inevitable Dominance, the air grew tense. Officers looked to their commander, waiting. 20 ships against an armada. "Orders, sir?" his lieutenant asked quietly. Vex Toral clenched his fists. Retreat would mean acknowledging the humans as a superior force. It would humiliate the Dominion. But to attack, to engage would almost certainly mean annihilation. And worse, it would prove that the humans had not only survived, but evolved into something even more dangerous than the myths had warned. "Maintain position," Vex said at last, his voice hoarse, "and inform the first speaker. The humans have returned." The message reached Xanther Prime with the speed of dread. Within hours, the High Council convened in crisis. 20 of their finest warships disabled. Their crews alive but powerless, towed back like broken toys by human vessels that had barely flexed their power. In the Grand Assembly Hall, First Speaker Felzarich stood before a wall of holographic projections. They showed the station, the human fleet, and worse, the defeat. Elder Vlar, the aged historian, stood nearby, his pale scales almost translucent under the council lighting. "This is beyond anything our records prepared us for," he admitted. "These humans are not the same species our ancestors faced." Another projection revealed their ships sleek, refined, yet somehow ancient. They didn't move, they flowed. Sensors showed them breaking conventional physics, slipping through space with impossible ease. Their energy signatures twisted gravitational fields. Their communication systems had bypassed the Dominion's strongest encryption protocols with almost casual disregard. "This," Elder Vlar said grimly, "is not a resurgence of an old enemy. It is the return of something reborn." Councillor Treva stood abruptly, her voice tinged with outrage. "Why now? Why return after 10,000 years? What do they want?" Felzarich raised his hands. "They have made no demands beyond recognition of the Dead Zone as their territory. Admiral Vasquez has requested a diplomatic meeting." "A trap," someone hissed. "If they wanted to destroy us," Felzarich said sharply, "they could have done so already." Murmurs swept the chamber. Few liked the thought, but none could deny the truth. The precision with which the inevitable dominance had been disabled spoke volumes. These humans weren't just more powerful, they were measured. They had control, and that made them even more dangerous. The next day, the diplomatic vessel Harmonious Accord departed for the edge of human-claimed space. Aboard it, First Speaker Felzarich paced quietly in his private chamber. Old recordings from the Purge played on loop. Grainy footage of human fighters, ships exploding in suicidal charges, tactical decisions that defied logic yet somehow turned the tide. They'd won only through overwhelming numbers and alliances with species that were now extinct. But these new humans, they were different, not just in technology, but in demeanor. Calculated, patient, and perhaps worst of all, unafraid. Felzarich arrived at Bastion Alpha under heavy escort. The docking sequence was seamless, almost welcoming. He was ushered into a chamber designed to accommodate all known species, and perhaps even some unknown. Soft lighting, neutral temperature, polite formality. Admiral Vasquez greeted him personally. She stood tall, more poised than any warlord the records had warned about. Her eyes, however, held a depth that Felzarich could not ignore. "First Speaker," she said, nodding respectfully, "thank you for accepting our invitation." They sat. Introductions were made. Formalities observed. Then the real conversation began. "Let me be clear," Vasquez said without flourish. "Humanity did not die in the Great Purge. We executed a strategic withdrawal, Operation Exodus. We took our people, our technology, and our future, and vanished." Felzarich's voice was tight. "To where?" She smiled faintly. "That remains classified." "And now you return?" "Yes," she replied, "because the galaxy needs us." She gestured to a holographic display. It expanded in midair, revealing a swirling darkness at the galaxy's edge. Massive, silent, relentless. "This is the void tide," she said. "A wave of exotic matter that consumes all conventional space. It will reach your territories within 50 standard years. We detected it 300 years ago." Felzerik's scales flushed with alarm. "Why didn't you warn us?" "We tried," Vasquez answered. "Anonymous messages, leaked data. Your people dismissed them as superstition and subversion. Your official policy classified cosmic threats as tools of dissidence." He said nothing. He couldn't, because it was true. "To stop it," she continued, "requires technology only we possess. Technology we developed while the galaxy forgot us." Outside the bastion, humanity's fleet hovered in silence. The galaxy had awakened to a truth it couldn't unsee. Across Dominion-controlled space, whispers became rumors. Rumors became panic. Humanity had returned. Not with vengeance, but with undeniable superiority. And the Xanther Dominion, ruthless and proud, now stood humbled. In every classroom, every military academy, instructors scrambled to rewrite the curriculum. "Forget the myths," they said. "Forget what we taught you about the humans. They are not extinct. They are not primitive. They are back. And they are watching." Admiral Helena Vasquez stood in the dimly lit chamber, its walls pulsing with quiet energy, a soft blue glow casting long shadows across the faces of those gathered. Around her, representatives of the galaxy's dominant civilizations sat in silence, each alien in physiology, but unmistakably human in their reactions. Suspicion, confusion, fear. What she was about to reveal would change everything. Behind her, a holographic image spun slowly in mid-air. A vast spiral of darkness edged in faint distortion hovered there like a silent predator poised at the galaxy's doorstep. Its movement was subtle, but constant. A slow, inevitable crawl toward their galactic home. "This," Vasquez said, her voice calm but cold, "is the void tide." The words hung heavy in the chamber. For most of those assembled, this was the first time they'd heard the term. For others, it had lived in the fringes of classified reports and dismissed theories. A myth, a cosmic exaggeration. Until now, she continued. "It is not a storm, not a weapon, not something we can negotiate with. It is a wave of exotic matter, devouring everything in its path: stars, planets, stations, all forms of conventional matter. It doesn't stop, it doesn't slow. It converts what it touches into energy, and grows stronger with each consumption." The room fell into murmurs. The insectoid Voth clicked their mandibles, whispering in their encoded dialect. The gaseous ethereals shimmered with fluctuating hues, betraying agitation. Even the machine intelligences of the Synthetica Collective rotated their sensory nodes toward the projection with calculated intensity. First Speaker Felzerich of the Xanther Dominion narrowed his eyes. "And how long until it reaches us?" Vasquez didn't hesitate. 50 standard years before it touches the outer rim. Less than 3 centuries before total galactic collapse. That estimate is conservative. You've known about this for centuries? Treva, a counselor from the Dominion, burst out. Her crystal headdress vibrated sharply with emotion. "Why are we only hearing about it now?" Vasquez met her glare without flinching. "Because when we tried to warn you, when we sent signals, messages, even detailed energy readings, you ignored them. You labeled them hoaxes. Your government classified them as dissident propaganda." Treva sputtered in protest, but Vasquez raised her hand and gestured. "The proof is here, in your own archives. Your own astrophysicists dismissed the early warnings because they didn't understand what they were seeing." She paused, letting the truth settle like dust in a tomb. Felzarek slowly leaned forward. "Why did you come back, Admiral?" "Why now?" Now came the second blow. One that would hit even harder than the first. Vasquez stepped back, allowing the holographic display to shift. A new image emerged, this time of a massive ring-shaped structure, a lattice of silver and obsidian threads radiating pulses of quantum energy. "This is the Aegis Array," she said. "It's our answer to the void tide, a quantum barrier generator capable of repelling the wave's exotic matter. We've tested smaller versions. They worked." Felzarek's voice was low but clear. "And now you need the galaxy's help to build the full version." "No," Vasquez said firmly. "We can build it ourselves. We have the technology. We have the infrastructure. What we need is time, coordination, and for the galaxy to stop pretending we don't exist." That landed with brutal clarity. The chamber rippled with reactions. One of the Synthetica units raised its voice, its synthetic tone ringing out. Probability matrices support the humans' assertions. Anomalies in the galactic fringe match the void tide profile. The threat is real. The proposed Aegis solution holds a 72-6 likelihood of success at scale. Another pause. Everyone looked to the Xanther delegation. "You want recognition of your sovereignty," Felzarek said quietly. "Re-establish your borders. Claim the dead zone as human territory." Vasquez nodded. "And a new galactic charter. One that ensures peaceful coexistence, scientific collaboration, and unified planetary defense against the void tide." Treva stood, her voice incredulous. "And in return, we trust the very species we once fought to extinction? That we gave our lives to defeat?" "No," Vasquez said, her voice steady. "You don't trust us. You trust that we are the only chance you have to survive what's coming." Outside the chamber, the human fleet loomed in orbit like silent sentinels. Hundreds of ships, each built during humanity's long exile. Their surfaces gleamed with quantum plating. Their engines pulsed with energy far beyond standard warp drives. Some had been constructed inside hollowed moons, others within gas giants. Each was born in secret, in isolation, in waiting. Now they had returned. And while the galaxy bickered over pride and politics, humans had begun building. Across the rim sectors, construction of the full-scale Aegis array had already begun. Specialized vessels towed the superstructure into place, while orbital factories printed and welded components with inhuman precision. Engineers, awakened from cryogenic sleep, worked in silence, many of them born in the void, raised on stories of Earth, and the day they would return. On the bridge of one such construction vessel, Commander Alina Voss stood overseeing the first installation. She was of a younger generation, born in a hidden colony orbiting a neutron star. She'd never set foot on Earth, never breathed its air, but she knew its legacy. She was its descendant, forged in exile. "Report?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Phase 1 ring segment complete. Fusion weld stable. Magnetic anchor engaged." She nodded, then turned to the viewport. Beyond the ship, the skeletal beginnings of the Aegis array floated against a backdrop of distant stars. It was massive, yet still only one segment. When completed, there would be 12, one for each major galactic vector, linked by pulse arrays, powered by neutronium cores, coordinated by human-developed AI. It was the last hope. Back at Bastion Alpha, Vasquez walked the observation deck alongside Felzarek. The Xanther leader was quiet, his mind clearly racing. "So, this is why you vanished," he said after a moment. She nodded, The Exodus was never a surrender. It was a strategy. One final play when every other option failed. You slept for 10,000 years. Not all of us, Vasquez replied. There were always sentries, awake, alert, watching the galaxy, recording its changes, waiting for the right time. The first speaker turned toward her. Why didn't you just come back as conquerors? You had the power. Still do. Vasquez's eyes drifted to the stars. Because we've changed, we spent those years not just building weapons but building understanding. Unity. We left as survivors. We returned as guardians. Velzerich looked at her for a long time. Guardians who still know how to wage war. She gave a faint smile. Old habits die hard. The silence lingered between them. Your species is terrifying, he said finally. So is yours, she replied. That's why we both survived. By the end of that standard week, the Galactic Concord was signed. Humanity was recognized as a sovereign civilization. The dead zone, now called the Nexus Expanse, was acknowledged as their territory, and the construction of the Aegis Array moved from theory to execution. Alien engineers were dispatched to human construction sites. Human scientists were invited to speak at galactic universities. Slowly, suspiciously, tentatively, a bridge began to form, but the threat loomed ever closer. The void tide had already consumed 3 minor dwarf galaxies. Its tendrils were accelerating. Time was running out. Alone in her quarters, Admiral Vasquez reviewed the latest simulations. The models were holding, but the margin for error was razor thin. She closed her eyes and remembered the last days of Earth, the fire, the despair, the final launch of the Bastion. She had been young then, but old enough to remember what it meant to lose everything. And she had vowed they would never feel that again. Not humanity. Not anyone. In the end, humanity had not returned to conquer. They returned because they had to. Because the stars were growing darker, and the galaxy needed a light that refused to go out. In the days that followed humanity's official return, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The sudden reappearance of a species long thought extinct, legendary, violent, and mysterious sent shockwaves through every major power. Political factions scrambled to reassess their priorities. Intelligence agencies pulled centuries-old archives from deep storage. Academies began rewriting military doctrines overnight. Every communication channel, from academic forums to underground networks, buzzed with the same question: what do the humans want? And the answer, surprisingly, was not conquest. It was something far more difficult to understand: cooperation. At first, skepticism ruled the day. From the gas-like ethereal species, who viewed the humans' return as a disruptive anomaly, to the Voth Confederacy's insectoid clans, who believed the humans were staging a massive deception, no one trusted them. Even the Synthetica Collective, a group of hyper-advanced AI civilizations, paused their probabilistic models to reevaluate assumptions they'd considered immutable. The galactic balance had been relatively stable for thousands of years. The return of a long-forgotten species, stronger, smarter, and sharper than ever before, was a disturbance few were prepared to embrace. In a sealed session of the Intergalactic Council held aboard a neutral orbital platform known as the Nexus Ring, representatives of all known powers met to address the situation. The chamber was vast and complex, constructed to accommodate the various needs of its alien attendees. Gravitational adjustments for aquatic species, chemically inert zones for silicon-based life forms, and filtered quantum field dampeners for AI participants. At the center of it all stood Commander Alina Voss, one of the newly awakened leaders of the next human generation. Young by cryogenic standards but experienced in galactic strategy, she had been chosen to lead the delegation tasked with explaining the full scope of the Void Tide threat and humanity's plan to stop it. As she stepped onto the platform, Elena looked out over the crowd of silent delegates. Their forms were strange, some beautiful, others terrifying living gas clouds, crystalline exoskeletons, glimmering neural conduits. But none of that fazed her. She had been born in the dark, raised in exile, trained in the simulations of Earth's fall. She knew what was at stake. She activated a holographic display that shimmered to life in the center of the chamber. This is a full-scale projection of the Void Tide as it currently exists on the galactic perimeter, she said clearly, her voice amplified and translated in real time. As you can see, it is expanding exponentially. Our models indicate that, if left unchecked, the Milky Way will be consumed entirely within the next 300 standard years. A low rumble of speech began across the hall, dozens of languages layered together. We've already seen what happens when a solar system is overtaken, she continued, shifting the display. It zoomed in to show a star going dark, its light sucked into the advancing tide. Everything it touches is converted. Matter becomes exotic energy. Planets, atmospheres, life, all destroyed. The murmurs turned to uneasy silence. The Aegis array, Elena said, pointing to a new section of the projection, is our solution, a quantum lattice barrier capable of repelling the tide. We've tested it on small scales. It works, but it must be constructed at full galactic scale. And we can't do that alone. A Voth representative, massive, with hardened mandibles and glistening chitin, raised one clawed limb. And what exactly do humans want in exchange? He demanded. You reappear after 10 millennia, armed to the teeth, and now ask us to trust your data. Elena didn't flinch. We want 3 things, she replied. First, recognition of our sovereignty over our reclaimed territories. Second, inclusion in galactic decision-making. Third, shared responsibility for the construction and deployment of the Aegis array. Shared? An ethereal delegate buzzed, her voice ethereal and flickering. Under your command? Under joint oversight, Elena corrected. But yes, we designed it. It's our technology, and without it, no species will survive what's coming. The hall erupted again in crosstalk, overlapping languages forming a chorus of doubt. But then, something unexpected happened. A representative of the Synthetica Collective designation SN14 rose and spoke. Our independent sensors have confirmed gravitational anomalies and energy signatures consistent with the phenomenon known as the Void Tide, the AI said in its neutral voice. Further, we have verified the humans' technological data regarding the Aegis array. Their claims are accurate. The threat is real. Suddenly, the mood shifted. If the Synthetica confirmed it, then it couldn't be dismissed. And if the humans were the only ones with a solution. Behind closed doors, diplomatic channels lit up. Alliances began to form in secret. Old enemies whispered to one another, now finding common ground in shared fear. The Xanther Dominion, though still reeling from its humiliation, chose pragmatism over pride. First Speaker Felzarich dispatched engineering teams to the closest human construction site tentatively, cautiously. They were welcomed without fanfare, but without hostility. Human and Xanther scientists stood side by side for the first time in history. It was awkward, yes, but productive. Meanwhile, the Voth Confederacy sent military observers to assess the human fleet. What they found shook them. Ships unlike any they'd seen, powered by quantum stream drives, operating with seamless AI-human integration. The Voth, a warrior species, respected strength above all. Quietly, they began to respect the humans. Within days, the Grand Concord for Galactic Continuity was proposed, a bold document drafted by joint human and Synthetica minds. It laid out a framework for interspecies collaboration on defense, research, and civil affairs. It wasn't perfect, but it was unprecedented. And most of all, it was necessary. Aboard Bastion Alpha, Admiral Helena Vasquez reviewed progress reports with her senior staff. The screen in front of her displayed construction metrics, diplomatic updates, and sensor readings from the outer rim. "Progress?" she asked, barely looking up. Commander Voss answered. 2 more rings completed. 3 Voth industrial platforms just came online. The Ethereals are contributing plasma containment tech. Synthetica already deployed 5,000 autonomous builders. Vasquez nodded, allowing herself the faintest hint of a smile. "They're starting to believe us," she said. Voss added. "Or at least, they believe they'll die if they don't help. Either way," Vasquez replied, "we build." Then she stood, walking to the viewport that overlooked the sprawling superstructure taking shape outside. Ships floated like scaffolding bees, welding and aligning massive segments of the Aegis array. Drones hummed through vacuum corridors, and cargo tugs moved resources like veins of a living machine. She placed a hand on the glass. 10,000 years, she whispered. And we're finally not alone. Not all were happy, of course. In fringe sectors, pirate lords and rogue factions called for resistance. Some accused humanity of fabricating the Void Tide to assert dominance. Others feared that the humans would use their technology to enslave the galaxy instead of saving it. But the proof was too strong. The data too clear. Even dissidents had to admit that something terrible was coming. And so, one by one, even the skeptics fell in line. The galaxy had changed. And it was changing together. At a public ceremony, the first multi-species crewed section of the Aegis array was activated. A Xanther scientist pulled the activation lever, while a human engineer monitored power flow. Both security officers stood nearby, flanked by Synthetica observers and a shimmer-form ethereal ambassador. It was a strange gathering, awkward, but powerful. The lights of the segment flared to life, pulsing in sequence, forming the first completed arm of the shield that would save them all. The crowd watched from dozens of ships in orbit, and for the first time in remembered history, they cheered together. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood at the far end of the observation deck aboard F Bastion Alpha, her eyes fixed on the swirling galaxy that stretched beyond the reinforced viewport. The stars twinkled like they always had, quiet, indifferent. But beneath that beauty, she knew the truth. The galaxy was no longer the place it once was, and neither were humans. Behind her, the hum of activity aboard the command deck moved with the precision of a civilization reborn. Engineers updated schematics for the Aegis array. Officers coordinated logistics with alien partners. Translators worked tirelessly to maintain harmony between species who, just months ago, didn't even speak to each other. But even now, even after the recognition, the collaboration, the cautious truce between ancient enemies, Helena knew that many still viewed humanity as a threat, a relic of a savage past, a ghost awakened, a blade, not a shield. And perhaps they weren't entirely wrong. She thought back to Earth's final days, the orange sky lit by orbital bombardments, the desperate final transmissions, the silence that followed. She remembered standing on the bridge of the last Earth fleet, preparing to vanish into the void while entire continents were reduced to dust behind her. The plan had been simple: disappear, survive, and return when the time was right. But what they hadn't planned for, what they couldn't have known, was how much that exile would change them. The Exodus was never meant to be permanent. It was humanity's last, most desperate move. In the final years of the war, as species across the galaxy united to purge Earth from existence, the surviving human leadership gathered aboard massive cryo-arcs, shielded by cloaked stations and deep space technology no other race had managed to replicate. Thousands of scientists, strategists, engineers, and thinkers, all frozen in time, hidden in the most uncharted regions of space, surrounded by automated guardians and silent stations. It wasn't survival. It was hibernation with purpose. At first, they had dreams of vengeance. They recorded every betrayal, every species that had raised weapons against Earth. They cataloged war crimes, ran simulations, drew battle lines for a return assault that would never come. Because as decades passed and the rage cooled, the surviving thinkers began to reflect on why humanity had reached that point to begin with. The humans who awoke later, generations born in exile, grew up with a different understanding. They never saw Earth's skies, never touched soil. To them, the stories of war were legends, not memories. Their culture evolved, isolated from galactic politics, shaped by philosophy, logic, and resilience. Education focused not only on technology and defense, but on self-awareness. What does it mean to survive? What does it mean to return? And when we do, who do we want to be? By the time Admiral Vasquez awoke, centuries had passed in real time. Thousands of years. Most of her old comrades were gone, their bodies long since buried or their minds encoded into AI archives. The human species had changed, but it hadn't grown weak. It had grown wise. The younger commanders who greeted her, like Elena Voss, were born of colonies she didn't recognize. Their voices were calm, but certain. Their knowledge rivaled anything the old Earth military had once produced, and their mission was not revenge. It was protection. "Ma'am," Voss had told her during her first post-revival debrief, "we didn't come back to finish the war. We came back because they don't see it coming. And because we do." The Void Tide. A force beyond politics. Beyond species. A universal enemy with no face, no motive, just consumption. And only humanity had the blueprint to stop it. But trust was hard to earn. When Helena first addressed the Galactic Assembly, many leaders were skeptical. Their archives were filled with images of burning cities, shattered fleets, and soldiers who fought like demons. Humans were remembered for their defiance, their refusal to surrender, their willingness to sacrifice everything. Entire species had vanished in the conflict. The Xanther, especially, had fought bitterly to destroy Earth, and still remembered the last battles with vivid horror. Now, those same species were watching humans take leadership roles, overseeing construction, commanding fleets, drawing blueprints to save the very galaxy that once tried to erase them. And they didn't know how to process that. In a private meeting following the Concord signing, First Speaker Felzerich finally said what many were thinking. "You are something else now," he told Vasquez. "Not conquerors, not victims, but something in between. What do you call yourselves?" Vasquez considered the question. She didn't have an easy answer. "We're survivors," she said at last. "But not just of your purge, of ourselves." He raised a brow. "Explain." She turned, looking out the viewport. "We were aggressive. You were right to fear us. We fought like we were the only species that mattered. And when the war turned against us, we chose fire over surrender. You thought we were gone, but all we did was wait. In the dark, watching, learning, changing. Felzerik's crystalline head shimmered under the lights. And now? Now we're guardians, she replied softly. Because if we don't step up, no one will. The galaxy noticed. Slowly, perceptions began to shift. On both homeworlds, ancient war chants were rewritten to include humanity as a brother in arms. A race who refused to die, who rose to meet darkness even when the odds were impossible. For the both creatures who valued honor above life, it was a mark of deep respect. The ethereal beings of floating plasma and light had initially viewed humans as brutish biological anomalies. But when human scientists helped stabilize one of their collapsing energy fields using adaptive quantum flow technology, something no other race had even attempted, their perception began to change. One ambassador was even quoted as saying, "They are fire and structure, passion restrained." Among the Synthetica, humanity's comeback was considered one of the most statistically improbable events in recorded galactic history. But the machines, ever precise, also recognized a deeper truth. Humans had transcended their chaos. They still embraced emotion, but now they channeled it with discipline, and that made them dangerous in a whole new way. Still, not everyone was convinced. In the outer systems, fringe elements, pirates, separatists, warlords whispered of an old prophecy that humanity would return not as saviors, but as overlords cloaked in peace. But even these voices found it hard to argue with reality. The void tide was real. The Aegis array was humanity's design. And in every battle waged against the growing cosmic wave, human-led fleets stood at the front lines, not claiming territory, not demanding tribute, just holding the line. Aboard the Prometheus, humanity's most advanced vessel, Commander Alina Voss met with a delegation from 3 newly joined minor civilizations. They were nervous, clearly unused to interstellar diplomacy. But Voss treated them with respect. She explained the technology, the purpose, the urgency, and then she offered something rare: training. "We'll send teams to your worlds," she told them. "Help set up detection systems, evacuation protocols, teach your people what to look for." "Why?" one of them asked, confused. "You owe us nothing," Voss smiled faintly. "No, but if we waited for someone else to do it, we'd all be dead." It was a simple answer, but one that echoed across a dozen systems. Because for the first time in remembered history, humanity wasn't taking, they were giving. They became known by a new title among many species: the Watchers of the Void. Not conquerors, not emperors, but guardians of the galaxy's edge, sentinels at the breach. The ones who refused to look away, even when no one else would. The first full segment of the AGI's array came online at precisely 700 Galactic Standard Time. A wave of quantum pulses surged through the massive ring, stabilizing its lattice field and projecting the first functioning barrier capable of resisting the advance of the void tide. Across star systems, sensors registered the event as a blip of concentrated energy, an anomaly to some, a miracle to others. But for the humans who had built it, for the engineers who had welded each plate, for the commanders who had risked everything to see it happen, it was a signal. The dawn had begun. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was proof. Proof that the plan had worked. Proof that unity, no matter how tentative, how difficult, could build something greater than fear. Admiral Helena Vasquez, stood aboard Bastion Alpha as the final confirmation pinged across her command console. Her staff erupted in a wave of restrained celebration smiles, nods, handshakes between human officers and alien advisors who once would have shot each other on sight. For the first time in 10,000 years, humanity had built something in the open not as a weapon, but as a shield. She turned to Commander Elena Voss, standing silently at her side. "We've lit the first torch," Vasquez said. "Let's see if they can carry it." Across the galaxy, broadcasts played the activation ceremony in every known language and frequency. Alien families watched from hollowed moons, aquatic cities, cloud stations above gas giants. For some, it was the first time they'd seen a human speak. For others, it was the first time they believed that salvation was more than myth. The message was simple: we are not your conquerors. We are your neighbors. We are your shield. The words echoed across sectors once hostile to human presence. They were spoken by Voss in her final address before the engineering fleets dispersed to begin construction of the remaining rings. Her tone was measured, her face calm but fierce. She didn't promise safety, she promised effort, commitment, and most importantly, shared survival. In a moment of symbolic unity, the Xanther Dominion, once the chief architects of humanity's destruction, signed a collaborative defense treaty with United Nations Defense Force. First Speaker Felzarich personally attended the ceremony, standing beside Admiral Vasquez on the bridge of the human flagship Prometheus. The act sent a ripple across the political landscape of the galaxy. Centuries of hatred didn't vanish overnight, but it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings are all that matter. Elsewhere, the Ethereals offered their plasma resonance technology, allowing the Aegis rings to amplify the barrier's coverage without increasing energy costs. The Vold dispatched warrior engineers to protect construction sites from fringe raiders. The Synthetica Collective provided quantum simulations that forecasted the Void Tide's path down to the hour. Even smaller civilizations, the Forgotten, the Minor, the previously ignored, stepped forward to contribute. Mining colonies provided raw materials. Agricultural planets offered food and supplies for construction workers. Refugee fleets volunteered to carry equipment and act as scouts along the frontier. A galaxy that once stood fragmented, competitive, paranoid was now moving together, because the alternative wasn't war, it was annihilation. But amidst the progress, there were still challenges. Several fringe powers refused to join. Some feared that the humans were using the Void Tide as an elaborate lie to seize galactic control. Others believed they could survive on their own, hidden in dark space, far from the threat's path. And some simply hated the idea of a united galaxy. They sabotaged supply lines, attacked diplomatic envoys, spread misinformation through pirated channels. But humanity didn't retaliate with force. Instead, they doubled down on transparency. Every schematic of the Aegis array was made publicly available. Every energy pulse, every calibration reading, every failure shared. Vasquez issued a public declaration. If the galaxy falls, it will not be because we withheld the truth. It will be because some chose to close their eyes. In the end, most of the holdouts came around, not because they trusted humans, but because the Void Tide didn't care who you were, and denial was not protection. By the end of the first year, 3 of the 12 Aegis rings were fully operational, and for the first time, something astonishing occurred. A leading edge of the Void Tide, estimated to reach an abandoned sector, collided with the outermost ring. It stopped, sensors confirmed it. The wave halted, slowed, recoiled. It wasn't a total reversal. The tide pulsed again, pressed forward, but the shield held. The test was no longer theoretical. It was real, and the galaxy exhaled in collective relief. Later that night, Admiral Vasquez sat alone in her quarters. The stars outside blinked softly. The Prometheus drifted silently beyond the hull, its quantum drive dormant, its crew asleep. In her hand, she held a datapad containing a single file, the last recording from Earth before the final Exodus jump. A voice crackling with static, delivering a simple message. To those who come after us, remember not just who we were, but who we chose to become. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very, very long while, she allowed herself to cry. A new dawn, humanity's return, did not bring war, but it did bring reckoning. It held up a mirror to the galaxy and asked a difficult question. What do we do when the myths return not as monsters, but as protectors? And more importantly, what happens when those protectors ask for our hand, not our submission? In time, the answer emerged. You build, you unite, you try again. Because even after centuries of mistrust, betrayal, and bloodshed, the future matters more. And if the darkest night could be endured, then maybe, just maybe, the dawn was worth fighting for. A real-world reflection. Stories like this one resonate because they remind us of the truth we often forget. The line between destruction and salvation isn't power, it's intention. Human history is filled with cycles of war and peace, of collapse and rebuilding, of fear and forgiveness. Our species has known darkness, just as we've known brilliance. We've made mistakes, we've hurt each other, we've burned bridges and sometimes entire cities, but we've also rebuilt, we've learned, we've grown, we've reached for something better. This story isn't just about galactic survival. It's about redemption. It's about becoming more than what the world remembers you for. And so, the lesson is this: you are not just what happened to you. You are what you do next. Humanity may have disappeared into the dark in this tale, but it came back not to conquer the stars, but to light the way forward. And in a world so often divided, maybe that's the story we need most.